In our final conclusion of the Legacy of Dee Dee, Mrs. Cordelia Hill's children speak about genealogy, the character trait they have adopted from Queen Mother, and their favorite Queen Mother story. As I have worked on this podcast, it is really interesting to me how when we are young, we do not realize that our parents are actually real people with their own lives and feelings. My Aunt Jackie shared the same sentiment.
I think it's interesting, too, how when we were growing up, you don't really think about your parents so much, and what their life was like for them when they were young or growing up or anything. And like with Mom, even all the questions that we would ask her, she always kind of was real evasive. She never really gave you an answer, or she gave you half an answer. And so now as an adult, I feel like there's so many things that I don't know, that your generation knows that I don't know. And maybe it's because it's different with your grandchildren than it is with your own kids. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing now about her or her parents, I feel like I'm hearing it for the first time.
This episode is dedicated to my grandfather, Richard Henry Lee Hill, who passed away in 2012. He was a kind and patient soul, and I love the love he had for our Queen Mother Dee Dee.
Whenever you're down, out in the cold, faithless and dark, your story's untold. Come take my hand and walk there with me. I know a place where we can be free.
I'm Mimi Jax. You may know me from my podcast, Mproper Mimi, where I have discussions about empowering women at home, work, or play. This podcast is a little different. Join me as I speak with the Queen Mother, my grandmother, Mrs. Cordelia Hill, about different experiences of her 92 years of life. You'll also be hearing from some of her children on how she's helped to shape their lives as well. Gems will be dropped and lessons will be learned. Get ready to want to adopt Mrs. Hill as your Queen Mother. This is the Legacy of Dee Dee. As mentioned in episode 1, Mrs. Cordelia Hill loves genealogy because of the historical aspect to it. I asked her children if they too have been influenced by our ancestors and our genealogy.
Oh, absolutely. You can't be who you are without having some type of ancestral influence, because you figure who the person that Mom is came from Papa and Grandma. I think Mom's church upbringing was something, instilled in her as a child.
We still remember our great-grandfather because he lived with us. And your mother particularly, right? Because she actually stayed with him in his house before he moved in to our house. And just the things that I know he did with his grandchildren, I think that shaped a lot of us. I've always wanted to get more historical information on how he actually got to Wilberforce and owned all the property. I mean, I didn't realize until last year that my great-great-grandfather lived with him, because I didn't know him. But, your grandmother did, because she went over to their house. She was there a lot. And I said, but Mom, you knew somebody that was born before slavery was abolished. She said, I never thought about it. She learned how to read the stock market from him. He taught all of them how to read stock prices because he had the farm, that part of the property, and he would give each of them a piglet for Christmas. And then they had to feed it and take care of it. And then around Easter, he would go through the stock market with them to see when the best day was to sell. Because she was reading the stock market one day, and I said, well, what would you have ever used the stock market for? And she told me that's how they knew when to sell their piglets that their grandfather gave them for Christmas. Yeah, so when you ask about historic aspects of the genealogy, there's definitely a lot of that. And I think that's why your mother really loves Wilberforce so much, and I do too.
I'm sure our ancestors had a lot to do with us being in the place in Ohio where we could settle and live a good life. Yeah, I migrated up from Kentucky, and it was a safe space. It really was so safe. We'd get up and go out and play. Never worried about anything. I'm very grateful. And what I see out here now, I'm glad they made the decisions they did.
I'm hoping that some of that family legacy trickles down to my children and grandchildren for ages to come. I think the genealogy is important. I like those stories. Someday they'll be talking about you.
It is no secret that your childhood influences your adult life. As noted, Queen Mother Dee Dee had high expectations for each of her children's education. A 2015 study in the official journey of the American Academy of Pediatrics found that people perform better in school if their parents set high expectations during childhood. However, it doesn't stop there. In 2023, Neuroscience News published an article regarding how parents' personalities shape children's lives. When asked which characteristics they have adopted from Queen Mother, these were some responses.
To start off, manners. If I find people that don't have manners, I feel like they needed to go back in their history and start all over again. It's just important to have manners, and it's just that simple. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah. And then another one is gratitude. Because you didn't have a lot, it made you more grateful for what you have. You just have to be thankful for it. Despite sometimes thinking that you didn't have much, you were still appreciative. Like I knew we didn't have a lot and it didn't matter, because we were happy. So I didn't try to show it. I didn't want to say like, wow, we didn't have it. That means we weren't appreciative, that we weren't grateful, and we're taught to be grateful. And then the last is independence. Each of us developed independency from an early age.
Not just myself, but all of us got from her was her faith. No matter what, it was there. We all recognized that and brought it forward in our lives too. Probably one of the strongest ones is listening. And I don't think you realize how important that is until you're around people that don't really listen to what you're saying. And that was probably the most common thing I heard her say, not just to me, but to everybody else when we were younger was, did you hear what I said? And we would say, of course, yeah, we heard what you said. And she would say, what did I say? That's one thing that I understand now why she kept pounding that into us. I have seen that all through my adult life. It's not something she made us do just on a whim, but it was in preparation for what we were going to need going forward.
Some of the things that I see in her and my grandmother, especially I also see in myself, volunteerism, philanthropy, that kind of thing. I think that, and maybe the compassion too for people and wanting to help people.
I began this endeavor because, like my grandmother Dee Dee, I love learning about the diaspora. I love our ancestry. I love our history. I love our people. I found the best way to absorb this information is through stories. It is only fitting that this project ends by hearing her children share stories about their mother.
My mother never worked when I was little. I was going to high school, I think, before she started to work. And she worked at Wilberforce University. And on Sundays, she would invite the international students over for dinner. We'd have like a banquet table set up between the living room and the kitchen. And there would be all this food. And I remember thinking, where did all this food come from? We didn't eat like this during the week, but there was a feast on Sundays and everybody was invited over after church for dinner. She always liked to cook. She likes her cooking. Comfort food. She doesn't want salads and yogurt and avocados. She enjoys cooking and we enjoy eating.
I just can remember so many things. It was so happy about. Christmas was always a big time too. I never knew about where she hid all the toys, and mom and dad and I come out, everything. It seemed like I blinked my eyes and I wake up and all the toys were under the tree. Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Cordelia got her learning from it. Oh gosh, and we would drive to the country. Not as much traffic on those old dirt roads, some pavement, some not so pavement. So she was behind the wheel, and we were all sitting back in that big station wagon. And she puts her foot on the pedal, and all of a sudden, the erection of every back of every child that went 90 degrees immediately. I thought it was 100, but I looked up and it was 90. And she was passing a car. I don't know if my eyes closed or I passed out, but she made it. Hallelujah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Very scary. And I think it was scary for her too. She may never admit it. Needless to say, is why we all have our license and she doesn't. But to this day, she can tell you how to get somewhere.
During that time when hot pants, mini skirts, granny boots, maxis and middies all came out, Mom had taken us to get school clothes. And I think I might have been a freshman in high school at the time. And she got us some mini dresses. So I wore mine to school one day, and the principal called me in and said, I'm going to have to send you home. You can't wear your dresses that short. So he called my mom to come and get us. Of course, Mom didn't drive, and she didn't have any way to come and get us. He told her, don't send me back in that dress. She showed up to the school the next day with my father. And I don't know if you know how your grandfather was very protective of his family. I mean, very protective. She came and told the principal, I bought that dress, and she'll wear that dress as often as she wants to. Later at home, she said they were talking about it. We were talking about it in the house. And she had on a mini dress. And Mom has legs. She said to Daddy, I don't understand. What do you think? Do you care if I wear this mini dress? And he said, if you want to show your ass, it's your ass to show.
I remember it was ninth grade. You took public speaking or something like that course. I didn't do my homework, of course. I did a report on the drainage system of middle schools. I went with her to a couple of Toastmaster classes, and then she brought home books and pamphlets because she wanted to learn how to publicly speak, and I read her pamphlets. To me now, it doesn't matter if it's one person or 500 or 10,000. I could speak in front of them, but it's nice.
She tells a story of a student who, brand new student, Wilberforce University, who came to the college with nothing. They didn't have anything. And how some of the other professors and administration kind of, made fun of that person or dogged him, and how she worked to help get them, bed sheets and comforters and just supplies and stuff like that they need. So she said, don't ever think that necessarily that you're better than anybody else, or the people, who don't have as much as you do aren't worthy.
There'd be memories of her sitting on the floor in the kitchen. Like if she was cold, she'd turn the oven on, she'd open the oven door, and she would sit on the floor in front of the oven on the phone to get the heat. She did it all the time. She'd sit right there on the floor in front of the oven.
Some final thoughts on Queen Mother by her children.
One thing that I would say to her is you did very well raising us all. I have no regrets, and I love you so much.
I love you with every bit of my heart and my soul. You'll never know how much I love you, but you've made me feel so much love. Just want to tell you that I love you.
Thank you for the perseverance, letting us choose our own path. Thank you.
I'd tell her that I love her, and just to thank her for raising us the way that she did.
I would say thank you for being my mother. Thank you for loving us all unconditionally. She's been a gift to the world.
I want to say thank you to my mother, Nelia Jackson. I also want to thank my aunts, Cheryl DePass, Marie Freeman, Jackie Bradley, and Stephanie Stills. Thank you to my uncles Conrad Hill and Richard Hill Jr. Thank you for sharing your experiences and memories so this series could be created with the love it deserves. And most importantly, thank you to my grandmother, Dee Dee, for without her, none of us would be here to share our stories. I, Mimi Jax, was the executive producer and creative director. Crackers and Soup LLC was my lead writer, producer, audio editor, and design director for this series. Thank you for joining me in this episode of the Legacy of Dee Dee. This series is brought to you by Mproper Mimi, where my mission is to empower women at home, work, and play. Learn more at mpropermimi.com, that's Mproper with an M, where you will also have the power to support this content and more by making a Buy Me a Coffee donation.